On Saturday, March 28th, 2026, something happened in the United States that has never happened before in the entire history of this country. 8 million Americans walked out of their homes and into the streets. Not in one city, not along one coast, in all 50 states. In more than 3,300 cities and towns, in places like Kotzebue, Alaska, Driggs, Idaho, East Glacier Park, Montana, places that have never seen a political protest in living memory. And they all said the same two words, no kings. This is the largest single-day protest in American history. It is bigger than the Women's March of 2017, bigger than the Vietnam War protests, bigger than any demonstration this country has ever produced in a single day. And the President of the United States, as of Sunday morning, had not said a single word about it. Instead, he posted on Truth Social about striking Iran hard and called for ending the Senate filibuster. Stay until the end, because what happened Saturday is not just a protest story, it is a political warning signal that every person, whether they were marching or not, needs to understand. And there is one number buried in the polling data that tells you exactly where this country is heading. Let's start with the scale of what actually happened, because the media coverage has been fragmented, and the full picture is more significant than any single report has captured. In New York City, tens of thousands marched from Midtown Manhattan through Times Square. The NYPD reported 0 protest-related arrests across all 5 boroughs. 0. In a city of 8 million people with crowds stretching across every borough, not a single arrest. That is a remarkable fact that got almost no coverage. In Minnesota, which became the symbolic center of the protests, the state's Department of Public Safety put the crowd at the state capitol in St. Paul at 100,000 people. Organizers claimed 200,000. Joan Baez performed. Bruce Springsteen performed a song he wrote specifically about the Minneapolis ICE crackdown. Senator Bernie Sanders spoke. Governor Tim Walz addressed the crowd. Minnesota had become the flashpoint for the entire movement after federal agents shot and killed 2 civilians during immigration enforcement operations earlier this year. And that wound has not healed. In Seattle, organizers estimated 90,000 to 100,000 people at a single rally. In Los Angeles, tens of thousands gathered at Grand Park before the evening, when a smaller group of agitators broke off and confronted federal agents outside a detention center. 9 people were arrested, not at the main rally, but in a separate incident hours later. In Washington, D.C., marchers moved past the Lincoln Memorial and onto the National Mall. In Dallas, clashes erupted between protesters and counter-protesters that included individuals pardoned after January 6th. But here is the detail that matters most politically. 2/3 of the RSVPs for Saturday's protests came from outside major urban centers. Not from New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago, from suburbs, from rural communities, from conservative-leaning states. Texas, Florida, and Ohio each had over 100 events. Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah had events in the double digits. States that voted heavily for Trump in 2024 were sending people into the streets in 2026. This is not a coastal liberal protest. That framing, the one the White House is using, is factually wrong. Nearly half of Saturday's events took place in Republican-held congressional districts. A 23-year-old TikTok creator with 2.1 million followers who attended the New York rally said it plainly. People are angry that we are at war right now, and Donald Trump is golfing. It is a betrayal of the American people. Now let's talk about why Saturday happened, because the Iran war is only part of the answer. The No Kings movement started in June 2025, on Trump's birthday, as a response to what organizers described as democratic backsliding, executive overreach on immigration enforcement that had turned into what many communities experienced as a military occupation, suppression of the Epstein files, and the general sense that the rules no longer applied to the people making them. That first mobilization drew an estimated 5 million people. October 20 to 25 drew 7 million. Saturday drew 8 to 9 million. The trajectory is not random. Each round of protests has been larger than the last, and each round has drawn from a wider geographic and ideological base. But the Iran war has added something the first two rounds did not have: an economic dimension that hits every American regardless of political affiliation. A Fox News poll published last week found that nearly 60% of Americans disapprove of the job Trump is doing as president. And a Reuters/Ipsos poll put his approval rating at 36%, the lowest of his second term. The Quinnipiac poll found 59% disapproval specifically on his handling of the Iran war. These are not liberal polling firms. Fox News, Reuters, Quinnipiac. They are all telling the same story, and the economic numbers explain why. Food prices are up nearly 20%. Gas is approaching $4 a gallon in most states. Higher in California and the Northeast, because Iran's partial closure of the Strait of Hormuz has sent oil prices to over $112 a barrel. The war has caused what Goldman Sachs called the worst oil shock in history. Fertilizer prices have spiked, hitting farmers who were already struggling with the loss of export markets due to tariffs. The people standing in the streets of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Salt Lake City, Utah, are not there because of ideology. They are there because their grocery bill went up 20% in 3 months. That connection between a war in the Persian Gulf and the price of bread in Wyoming is the thing the White House has not successfully explained to the American public. And it is the thing that is driving the protest movement beyond its traditional boundaries. Now let's talk about what the White House actually said, because the response to the largest protest in American history was revealing. Before the protests, White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson called them Trump derangement therapy sessions. After the protests, when Trump stepped off Air Force One in Miami on Sunday morning, he had still not commented, and his Truth Social posts were about bombing Iran harder and reforming Senate rules. The administration's official response was, "We do not think about the protest at all. Only the reporters covering the protests care about them." This is a deliberate strategy. Ignoring mass protest is a choice, and it is one that carries real political risk heading into the 2026 midterm elections. No King's organizers have already announced the next step: a nationwide economic protest on May 1st. A general strike. The kind of action that does not just fill streets, and it stops commerce. Political scientists have been writing about a specific threshold for years, when 3.5% of a country's population engages in sustained nonviolent mobilization. Governments have historically been forced to make concessions. 3.5% of the United States population is approximately 11.5 million people. Saturday's protests drew 8 to 9 million. The gap is closing. The Center for American Progress noted this week that the Trump administration has already made at least some concessions in response to Minnesota's mobilization earlier this year, reducing the number of federal agents deployed in the state after sustained local resistance. The pattern exists. The question is whether it repeats nationally. There is one other dimension of Saturday that deserves serious attention: the presence of veterans. At protest after protest, across the country, veterans showed up in significant numbers. In Durham, North Carolina, a Navy corpsman who served in Vietnam led the crowd in a chant of "No More War." In Salt Lake City, a Navy veteran named Russ Juilerot said, "I am happy to have served my country, but I am ashamed of where we are today." In Chicago, a veteran named Chris Holy told CNN he has become so vexed with the Trump administration that he felt compelled to protest for the first time in his life. His son marched beside him. These are not people who oppose American military power on principle. These are people who served in uniform and are now standing in the streets, saying this war in this way, for these reasons, is wrong. When veterans march against a war while it is still happening, that is not background noise. That is a signal. It is the same signal that appeared in 1967 and 1968 around Vietnam, and everyone who is paying attention then knows what came after. And now here is the political reality that no one in the Trump administration wants to say out loud. The 2026 midterm elections are 7 months away. The House majority the Republicans currently hold is razor thin, a margin of just a few seats. The districts that will decide control of the House are not in deep red Texas or deep blue California. They are in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Detroit. They are in exactly the communities where the No Kings protests drew their biggest increases in participation this weekend. Leah Greenberg, the co-founder of Indivisible, the organization that has been the backbone of the No Kings movement, specifically cited Bucks County and Delaware County in Pennsylvania, East Cobb and Forsyth in Georgia, and Scottsdale and Chandler in Arizona as places showing huge increases in engagement. Those are not random counties. Those are the exact swing suburban districts that will determine who controls Congress in November. A 17-year-old protester at the Arlington, Virginia march told reporters he will cast his first ballot in the November midterms. He said, "My singular vote is going to mean so much. I hope that all of our voices together will be enough." That is the sentence the Republican Party's strategists are reading very carefully this week. So here's the bottom line. 8 million Americans marched on Saturday, the largest protest in the history of this country. They marched in red states and blue states, in cities and in small towns and suburbs where people have never protested before. They marched because of a war that has pushed gas to $4 a gallon and food prices up 20%. They marched because 2 people were shot by federal agents in Minnesota. They marched because a president who ran on ending foreign wars is now asking Congress for $200 billion to fight one. The White House is pretending not to notice. The polling says 36% approval. The midterms are 7 months away. This is not the end of the No Kings movement. Saturday's organizers have already called for a general strike on May 1st. The trajectory of this movement: 5 million in June, 7 million in October, 8 million in March. Points in one direction. Whether that momentum translates into electoral change, economic disruption, or policy concessions from an administration that has shown no interest in compromise, that is the story of the next 7 months. What happens at the May 1st general strike, how the Republican Party is privately responding to Saturday's numbers, and what historical protest movements tell us about where this one goes next. That is what I am covering in the next episode. If you found this valuable, subscribe to Alex P.S. Insights. This is where I break down the forces shaping American politics and world events. The numbers, the trends, and the real story behind the story. I will see you in the next one.